Before this video starts, if at any point you feel like you've learned something or you enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Today we're going to be trying to recreate these block cards using only HTML and CSS. There's a hover animation as well, which we will take care of using only CSS. We're going to need a few files to put together these block cards. Firstly, we're going to need all the images. These are images for the blogs, as well as profile pictures for the users who have written the blogs. Along with those, we're going to need an index.html file and a style CSS to do the styling. Let's start with the HTML. We're going to pull up the skeleton code by hitting the exclamation mark followed by tab. If I now hit tab a couple more times, I can change the title of the HTML document. In this case, I'm just going to add block cards. We're going to add a div for the card, and we're going to set its class name to card. The shorthand way of doing this is to type dot followed by the class name and then tab. Now within this card, we're going to have a few elements, first of which is an image. This image is the picture for the blog. So I'm going to add an image tag with a class name of picture. To do this, I'm going to type img for the image tag followed by dot, and the class name is picture. The source for this image will be any one of the images you have for your blog. I'm going to be omitting the alt attribute, but you should definitely add a value for this for accessibility. As you can see, when I hit save, the image is loaded on the left. The size of the images is a bit large and it's going to remain like this for a while until we get to styling, so apologies, but we will definitely fix it. Next, we want to add another image for the profile picture of the user, and the class name I'm going to be setting for this is going to be profile. The source for this will be any one of the profile pictures you've got. Again, I'm omitting the alt attribute. After this, we want to add the title of our blog. In this case, it can be an h3 tag, and I'm just going to add some lorem ipsum placeholder. Followed by this, I want to add a description or a preview for the blog. This can be a paragraph or a p tag. And again, I want to add some lorem ipsum placeholder, but I need a lot more words, so instead of typing it out, I'm going to use the shortcut. I'm going to type lorem and then hit tab, and that should generate me a bunch of placeholder text. After this, we want to add the insights. This includes the likes, comments, and the date that the blog was posted. So I'm going to add a div with a class insights. Within this div, I'm going to add another div with a class of inline. We're going to see the use of this div when we get to styling. Inside the inline div, I'm going to add two p tags. One is for the likes and one is for the comments. And outside of the inline div, but still within the insights div, we're going to add a p tag for the date that the blog was written. In this case, I'm just going to do 4 days ago. And that's all we need for the HTML of the card. I'm going to copy this a couple more times and update the images as well as the likes, comments, and date that the blog was posted. When I hit save, Live Server takes care of the hot reloading. And as you can see, when I scroll down, we have all the different images as well as the text for the block cards. A quick side note, if you don't have Live Server, you can get this from the VS Code extensions. And to open an HTML file with Live Server, all you have to do is right click on that file and click on Open with Live Server. With that side note out of the way, let's move on to styling. Before we do though, we need to link our style sheet. To do this, within the head tag, let's add a link. If I just type in link and hit tab, it should do the work for me, and the href will be style.css, which is the name of my CSS file. Now let's move on to CSS. We're going to add a few styles to every element in the index.html file. We're going to set the margin and padding to 0. We're going to set the box sizing to border box, and I'm going to set the font family to Tahoma, but feel free to pick any font that you like. Perfect. Now let's style the body tag. We want to set the dimensions of the body so that it takes up the entire viewport. So we're going to set the height to 100 VH or viewport height and the width to 100 VW or viewport width. Now we want to center everything that's within the body on the screen. To do that, we're going to set the display to flex and then justify content and align items to center. But we don't want all the block cards to be sticking together, so we're also going to add a gap. In the case of smaller screens, we want the cards to wrap around on the screen instead of still going horizontally and potentially getting really chaotic. So to do that, we're going to set the flex wrap to wrap. Now remember, we're not setting the flex direction because by default this is row, so all the elements will be positioned in a row. I also want to add some padding and finally change the background color to something dark. And with that, we've completed styling the body. Now let's move on to the cards themselves. Any div with the class name of card, we want to add the following styles. We want to set the height to 25 rem and the width to around 20 rem. Now we want to organize all the elements in the card in a column. So we're going to use display flex to do that, and we're going to set the flex direction to column. We also want the elements to not stick together, so we're going to add a little gap. Now to contrast well with the background, I'm going to give the cards a light background color. In this case, it's off-white. I want the cards to have a little bit of padding, so we're going to add that. In this case, the padding is going to be 0.5 rem top and bottom and 1 rem left and right. I also want the cards to have nice rounded corners, so we're going to add a border radius of 1 rem. And we're going to set the font color of anything inside to be the same as the background. Finally, and this will come useful for the hover animations, we're going to set the transition. We're going to target all transitions, all transformations, all animations to be a duration of 0.4 seconds and have a timing function of ease. This will make sure that all animations, transitions, transformations are very smooth. Perfect, things are starting to take shape. Let's now move on to changing the size of these images because they're still very big and we want them to fit on the card. So let's start with the block pictures. The class name for these was picture. I want the picture to take around 60% of the card, so I'm going to set the height to 60%. Now this has distorted the image, and to fix that we can change object fit to cover. What this does is it makes the image take the same amount of space, but instead of distorting it, it's going to scale it or crop it to fit that space. Now one thing I noticed is that the images don't have rounded corners, but the block card does, and this looks very bad. So I want to set rounded corners on the image, but only on the top left and the top right. To do that, I can set the border radius to 1 rem, 0 and 0. This makes it so that only the top left and top right corners have a border radius of 1 rem, but the other two corners have a border radius of 0. Now there's a bit of an offset between the edges of the block card and the edges of the image. To get rid of this, we're going to undo the padding that we've added to the card just for the image by changing the margin of the image. So we added padding of 0.5 rem to the top and bottom of the block card and 1 rem to the left and right of the block card. We want to change the margin to offset this for the image. So we're going to do minus 0.6 rem on the top, we're going to do minus 1.1 rem on the right, 0 on the bottom of the image because we don't want to move it down, and minus 1.1 rem to the left of the image. This changes the margin so that now the image takes up all of the block card very nicely without any offset. And with that, we've completed the styling for the blog image. Let's move on to the profile pictures. The profile pictures had a class name of profile. We're first going to change the dimensions. Let's set the height and width to 5 rem. Now we can see that this has distorted the image. And we also want the image to be a nice circle. So we're going to set the border radius to 50%, and to take care of the distortion, we're going to set object fit to cover. We want to position these profile pictures roughly in the center and a bit to the right. To do that, we want to position these profile pictures absolute relative to the card. Once again, we want to position the profile pictures absolutely relative to the card. To do that, we're going to have to set the position of the card to relative, and then the position of the profile pictures to absolute. Now let's place it where we want them to be. We want the pictures to be about 1 rem from the right and about 50% from the top. I've used the calc function to go 50% from the top and take away 1 rem. The profile pictures are sitting exactly where we want them to. But to add a small little touch, we're going to add a bit of a box shadow. This makes it look like the profile picture is sitting on top of the card. And finally, I'm going to add a Z index of 100. Perfect, we've now styled both the images on the block card. Let's move on to the description. The description is taking quite a bit of space on the card. We want to give it a specific height and then make sure that any overflow is hidden. So to select the paragraphs within any div with the class name card, we can use the following selector. Now, like I said, we want to give it a specific height and then any overflow should be hidden. Setting the height to 30% and the overflow to hidden takes care of that. Now let's move on to the insights div. There's a few things going on here, so let's go back to the HTML to get some clarity. Within the insights div, we have two children. We have this inline div and then we have this b tag. We can ignore these because these are children of the inline div. So relative to the insights div, we only have 2 children. What we want to do is space these as far apart horizontally as we can. To do this, we can use display flex and justify content space between. And there we go, the elements have been placed in a row and they are as far as they can be horizontally. What we want to do is align them to the center vertically. To do that, we can set align items to center. Now, we want to set the width to be 100%, and we want to add a bit of padding to the top of this section. The final piece of the puzzle is the likes and the comments. This is where the inline div comes into action. All we want to do again is to place the 2 elements in a row and add a bit of gap. So to do that, we set the display to flex and add a gap of 1 rem. And just like that, the card styling has been complete. All we need to do now is to add different styles for when we are hovering on the cards. To do this, we're going to use the pseudo class hover on any div with the class name card. When we hover on the card, the first thing we want to do is to set the cursor to a pointer to indicate to the user that they can click on the card. Next, we want to increase the size of the card a bit. And finally, one last touch we're going to add is to translate the card vertically upwards by 2 rem. So to do that, we've set the transform to translate Y and we've passed in -2 rem. And now we can see all of this in action on the left hand side. And just like that, we recreated these block cards using only HTML and CSS, including the hover animation. One last thing that I wanted to show you is what it looks like on smaller screens. As you can see, the cards automatically position themselves vertically on top of each other. This is because we set flex wrap to wrap on the body tag. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Leave in the comments below any ideas you have for future episodes, and I will see you all next time.